Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Fan Podcast. Today I'll be going to talk about two of Australia's ever cricketers, Marsh and Warne, who unfortunately both passed away late last week from heart attacks. Both players were revolutionary players, which is what I'm going to get into today. First I'll speak about Marsh, who died unfortunately early on Friday morning, Sydney time. Marsh redefined what it meant to be a wicketkeeper batsman in Australia. He was the first Australian wicketkeeper to score a Test century, he also broke the record for the high. Obviously, it meant he broke the highest score by an Australian wicketkeeper, which was previously held by Don Talon, who had a top score of 92. That record of 92 was actually equalled by Marsh earlier in his career before he scored a Test century. He was 92 not out, but the Australian Test captain at the time, Bill Lawry, actually declared when he was on 92 not out, leaving him obviously 8 runs short of making history in that game, being the first Australian Test wicketkeeper to score 100. But as I said, he did go on to score 3 centuries in Test cricket for Australia, as well as 28 half centuries. He was originally picked over Brian Tabor, Ray Jordan and John McLean, all of whom at the time were considered better wicketkeepers than Marsh, but because it was believed that Marsh was actually a better batsman than all 3 of those players, he was picked over them. This was controversial at the time because Australia always picked their wicketkeepers on their wicketkeeping ability, and then they picked them if there was 2 players that were in contention. They were fairly similar in terms of what people believed in their wicketkeeping ability. Then they would go to, okay, who's a better bat? So his selection changed the thinking, because he was considered not as good as a wicketkeeper, but a better bat, which is why he got why he got picked. So, and keep in mind, like, people think, how long was that thinking in line? Like, Test cricket had been around for 80 and 90 years by this time, so that there's a lot of tradition for Australia to have. That they went against picking someone on their batting for a wicketkeeper over someone that was considered a better wicketkeeper. And this was quite crucial, changing that thinking, because it was always thought, once you get to the wicketkeeper, it was basically curtains for the innings. It was just a matter of time before you bowled the Australian team out, because the bowlers weren't always, back then, the greatest batsman, and the wicketkeeper wasn't always the greatest batsman either. They usually averaged in the high teens, low 20s. But he changed that, where as much as he didn't have the best average, he had the batting average of 26. But he really changed the game, where they picked people that Australia considered both their batting and keeping. If they were a pretty ordinary they wouldn't usually get picked after that. They had, which obviously that went on to Ian Healy, who averaged about 28. Ian Healy was a very, very good wicketkeeper. Warne, who I'll actually get into in a moment, actually considered him the best wicketkeeper that he ever bowled to. I believe he said Ian Healy was the best keeper that he ever bowled to, that kept to him above Adam Gilchrist. So, and then obviously that also inspired, and Adam Gilchrist actually said he was inspired by Rod Marsh, who was considered more a batsman keeper than a keeper batsman. He was, because a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference? Well, a keeper batsman is a wicket keeper that is a good batsman, whereas Adam Gilchrist was considered a batsman that could keep. Maybe someone that Ian Healy is usually considered slightly, as much as Adam Gilchrist has more dismissals than Ian Healy. A lot of people think that both thought that Ian Healy was the better keeper than Adam Gilchrist, as much as Adam Gilchrist was a very good keeper. And, obviously Adam Gilchrist revolutionised the batsman. He changed the thinking that everyone should just go out and blast as a wicket keeper. Obviously that hasn't happened since, as much as Brad Haddin was a very good keeper. But yeah, like I said, he really changed the thinking of Australian players. Australian way of thinking that you need a bat as well as keep. If you want to be, you can't just be a wicket keeper anymore like you did in the past. But at the beginning of his career, he was actually nicknamed Iron Gloves. And I'm not exactly sure where the term came from, but what it means is that you're a very poor wicket keeper. You drop a lot of catches. You let a lot of bias through. You miss stumpings that you would expect someone to take at that level. Those kind of things. They miss a lot of basic. They make a lot of errors that you wouldn't expect at that level. So he got nicknamed Iron Gloves, but he really improved it over time, and he was actually broke the record for the which has since been overtaken by Ian Healy and Adam Gilchrist for Australia. But at the time, he actually had the most dismissals for a keeper. And so that really shows he improved. And actually became a saying in Australia that opposing batsmen would be caught Marsh bowled Lily, which is, of course, is in reference to batsmen often getting caught behind, and with Rod Marsh taking the catch and off the bowling of Dennis Lillee, who's considered one of Australia's greatest fast bowlers. He also strongly believed in the spirit of the game. He didn't just believe win at all costs. He believed that, yes, it is great to win, but he was a strong believer in the spirit of the game. Even if something was in the rules, if he didn't believe it was in the spirit of the game, he would call it out. And even if it was to his own teammates, he would call them out. The most famous of this was the infamous one-day match against New Zealand with the underarm delivery by Trevor Chappell. Basically, a little bit of background. The underarm delivery was banned in England, but it wasn't banned in Australia. And most people would listening to this would know what the underarm delivery is, but this is just a quick summary for those that don't know. Basically, the underarm delivery was allowed but questionable in went against the spirit of the game. And basically, in a one-day game against New Zealand, New Zealand needed 6 runs to tie the game on the last ball of the innings. And Greg Chappell, who was the Australian captain of the Australian team, went up to his brother, who was bowling the last over, Trevor Chappell, and said, Greg Chappell instructed his brother Trev to bowl an underarm delivery, which meant the ball would literally roll along the ground, meaning it would be impossible for New Zealand to hit a six and tie the game, and which would obviously lead to an Australian victory because New Zealand would run out of deliveries. Rod Marsh went up to Greg Chappell. He saw what was going on. He went up to Greg Chappell as well as Trevor and said, "Don't do it. We shouldn't want to win like this. We shouldn't win like this. We should win the right way. This is not a good look." He apparently was furious, obviously, like a lot of other people were. He stood back from the stumps in his normal fielding position for as if Trevor Chappell would bowl a normal delivery in defiance of what was happening. Because basically with that kind of thing, he would go up to a keeper would go up to the stumps and stand directly behind the stumps, but he stood back in defiance of what was going on, and he went into the apparently, according to reports, he went into the sheds and blew up at the chapels. He blew up at both of them, saying it was embarrassing. It was a disgrace, not only to the brothers but the entire team, and a lot of Australians actually felt embarrassed as well. They said a lot of the people in the crowd actually booed. It was a game in Australia, and the Australian crowd booed the Australian team for doing it, because as much as they obviously wanted Australia to win, they felt the same way as Marsh. They wanted to win the game in the right way. Apparently, even because this is back in the days where you used to, after the game, the crowd used to be allowed onto the field, and apparently the spectators came onto the field, and this little girl actually pulled on Greg Chappell's shirt and said, "You cheated." So that was a feeling, and he felt the same way as what the crowd did, and he was furious. That was just an example of he was always fighting to win, always wanting to win. He always fought for the next run or to prevent a run or expected the best out of everyone, but he wanted to win in the right way. He didn't want to just go, okay, let's win by any means necessary. He wanted to make sure that everyone, that the team is respected and they respected the way they won. Then he retired, and then he became a respected coach, and he also had the thankless job of being the Australian selector. He coached many teams, did reasonably well. He was respected in the role, and then he became the selector in the I think it was around 2011, and this was a transition time for Australia because a lot of players from the early 90s to the mid to late 2000s were just leaving because Australia could have just retiring. And Australia at this time could have fielded could have had two or three competitive teams, and a lot of those teams would have been able to beat a lot of Australia's second side could have beaten a lot of international sides, and they could have even very nearly fielded a pretty competitive third team, but they all came through at the same time. So this is a time where you had Matty Hayden, Justin Langer opening, you had Ponting, Damian Martin, Darren Lehman, Michael Clark was still playing. That's when he basically took over when Michael Clark was captain, and obviously he went through to about 2013, but You had other players before that, like Gilchrist retired, McGrath, Lee. Like Lee was basically only playing shorter forms of cricket at that stage. He had given up first class in Test match cricket. You had all these guys. Jason Gillespie had basically retired. So you had all these guys that retired, and then you had all the batsmen, and then all these backup batsmen like Michael Bevan, who was an absolute gun in one-day cricket. You had Stuart Law and all these other blokes that could barely get a game, that only played in the one-day team, or they couldn't even get in the one-day team, and as well as Brad Hogg's another one, and they all basically retired at the same time. So all these guys, what basically happened is it was at a transition time. They didn't have all these young guys coming through, and so you lost, Matty Hayden, Justin Langer, Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath all played over 100 tests. Adam Gilchrist played 96 tests. Damien Martin played 60-odd tests. So you had all these guys leave at the same time. Ricky Ponting was coming towards the back end of his career, and he retired around that time. So when he took over as selector, he had a tough job of picking all these basically young guys, and it was extremely hard because he didn't have, didn't have 3 or 4 blokes that you knew you could rely on, because they were all retiring they all retired within like 3 or 4 years of each other when he was selected, and he had to kind of, hit and miss, because, cricket's an odd game where it's unlike other sports like rugby, where you could have a gun junior, someone that's a gun junior. You can usually he could be a solid first. He would be a good first grader, and these guys could be good rep players, and that you kind of have an idea that which guys are going to excel at the representative level. Whereas in cricket, it's a little bit of a feel, and which I'll get into with Shane Warne, because Shane Warne was one of these blokes when he first got selected for Australia. But he had a lot of blokes the way you have in cricket, it's a bit different to other sports, whereas sometimes it's like a feel kind of thing. Like it's based on a look. You like, that guy's not performing right now, but I reckon he could potentially be a very gun player. He could be a very good player, and he could be a gun at international level. And for example, a classic example of that currently is Marnus Labuschagne. I know Rod Marsh didn't pick. He had stood down as selected by the time Marnus Labuschagne came in, but he was only averaging something like in the mid-30s when he got first pick for Australia, and now he's averaging something like with the bat, and he's now averaging 60-odd in the with the bat, and he's got one of the highest averages in world cricket at the moment in Test match. And this is where it's cricket's a bit different. So a lot of it's on a look and a feel of the player. Like you think, that guy could be good, and that's where sometimes it's hit and sometimes it's a miss. So, he picked a lot of players, and unfortunately, with the way that cricket's gone these days, international tours, when you travel overseas, is extremely difficult to win overseas. And he stood down after a series in South Africa where Australia didn't do as well. He resigned as selector, but he did a good job. He did his best whenever he went he didn't half go into anything, and he always went 110%, and he wanted the best for everyone. He didn't want to just have it where okay, this is the way it's going to be. He expected the best of everyone, and he did his best, and he led with his action. He always did the best he could. And it's unfortunate that he died. But we had to remember he is someone that will be remembered as someone that revolutionised the game. He revolutionised the wicket-keeping role within Australia. He's changed the game, and he brought a new generation in, and I really hope people remember him as that, because he deserves it. He was a great cricketer. Which brings me on to Shane Warne, who died unfortunately only hours after Rod Marsh. Shane Warne actually tweeted out when he heard the news about Rod Marsh. He tweeted out condolences to the the Marsh family. And then a few hours later, he died of the same reasons that Rod Marsh had died of a heart attack. And Shane Warne, he was a character. He was a competitor, and he was the same thing. Like, he was in the same mold as Rod Marsh. Like, yes, Rod Marsh was a wicketkeeper, and Shane Warne was a leg spinner, but they just weren't. They didn't hold back in anything that they did. They were competitors, and they went 110% at everything. And with Shane Warne, he apparently was a gun all-round sportsman. He apparently was a very good AFL player. Apparently he was very close to getting picked up by St Kilda in the AFL, but things just didn't work out for him. But just to be at that top level sportsman, to get that close as close as he did to make it to the AFL, he had to be a gun player. And by all accounts, he was a very, very good player in the AFL. But when he got cut from the AFL, he turned to cricket, and he apparently did play quite a bit of cricket, but then he focused more on AFL. But when that fell through, that's when he started focusing more on cricket. His cricketing ability was off the chart. He went 110% at it, and he did something that was quite. He brought something back, which was leg spin bowling, because after the 70s and 80s, with the likes of the person that I mentioned during when I was speaking about Rod Marsh, Dennis Lillee, one of his teammates, Jeff Thompson, as well as so many other bowlers in that time. There were so many great Australian fast bowlers, and while Australia had quality leg spinners in the past, blokes like, if you go way back, just before and just after the Second World War, you had blokes like Clary Grummet and Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly is, as in Bill O'Reilly, the Australian cricketer, not Bill O'Reilly, the Fox News host. That's who the stand is named after at the SCG. There's actually a stand at the SCG called the the O'Reilly stand. That's who it's named after. He was a gun. Both Grummet and Bill O'Reilly were gun leg spinners, and then you also a little bit after that, in the 60s and that, you had Richie Benaud, who was an absolute freakish player, Australian captain, very good. But then they kind of died off once I shouldn't say die off, but die off as in Australia weren't picking leg spinners. Well, that's what I mean by die off. They weren't, because Australia has so many quality fast bowlers, and not many people were bowling spin. Everyone wanted to bowl pace. They want to be like Jeff Thompson. They want to be like Thompson. They wanted to be like Lillee. They want to be like all these guys. And that's where Shane Warne brought it back. He brought back leg spin, and He was a larger-than-life larrikin. He was a big personality, and he was what Australia needed to cap that really good side. Like, Australia had blokes like Brett Lee, and Craig McDermott. I know Craig McDermott was before, but we had Glenn McGrath, Craig McDermott, Brett Lee. This was all players that Shane Warne played with. Jason Gillespie, Bruce Reid. The list just goes on. And these Shane Warne, you needed a leg spinner. I think Australia needed a spinner, and then a very good leg spinner was what Australia needed, and that's what Shane Warne was. People say, you can win with 4 pace bowlers, but unless you're the West Indies with Joel Garner and Malcolm Marshall and these kind of guys, and Curtly Ambrose, that are all bowling 145 Ks and bowl it, smashing every ball out of the ground, the whole stump out of the ground, virtually every ball, and you couldn't hit anything. You just needed that spinner to mix things up. And when you get first got, so he really capped the team. He was something that Australia needed. And this is, and when Shane Warne got picked, this is what I was saying earlier with Rod Marsh being the selector. He got picked on a kind of a feel. He got in a look. He didn't, but he wasn't so much. He got picked on so much skill. He had the skill. Sorry, skill's not the right word. Results. He wasn't picked on the results because he was averaging about 33 in first class cricket. So for bowling at that time, it was pretty high. You would want to be in the mid. Better average would be like mid to high 20s. So basically, as a bowler, the lower like I said, the lower the average, the better for a bowler, and the higher the average for the batter, the better. But so he got picked on a look, and thinking that he had something special, that he could be special. He could be one of those blokes that he was a diamond amongst the rough kind of thing, and he could be that guy that got picked. Be better at test level than what he is at first class cricket, like person I was saying before, minus Labuschagne. And in his first test, it looked like he wasn't going to be the diamond. He was going to be someone that was going to be one of the rough. He got about 1 for 150. He got whacked all around the place, and basically his first wicket was someone trying to sock him, and then they hit it straight up and got caught. But the thing with Warne was that he was persistent. He was always looking to get better. He wasn't like, I'm Shane Warne, I'm good. He goes, I'm Shane Warne, I'm good, but I want to be great. And then when he went great, I want to be a legend. I want to be, the best ever. And he always worked hard to get to that next level. He always worked hard to be the next, get to that next level, create something different, always be one step ahead of the game. And I think that he, most people will say that he achieved that. And he ended up taking 708 wickets at test level and became one of Australia's best ever players, which he wouldn't have picked after his first test, but like I said, with the persistence, he did. And he was one of the best players of his generation as well. Like, people often consider him to the Sri Lankan spinner Muralitharan, who was an off spinner, and they often said, who was a better spinner. A lot of people argue that Murali was the better bowler simply because he took more wickets and less tests, and he had a better average. So therefore, he must be the better bowler, and he must be better than Warne. I can understand that argument. It's a fair argument. I can understand it. But personally, I don't agree with it, and I'll give you. I'll explain why. I think Shane Warne was a better bowler than Morley. Name one other bowler that Sri Lanka had in that time. Like, I was able to name so many fast bowlers during Shane Warne's time, and he also played with blokes like a few other names like that I can add to that. Blokes like Damien Fleming, Stuart McGill, also he was also a leg spinner like Warne. While he was a leg spinner, he bowled in a different style while being the same type. He bowled differently. It's hard to explain unless you're a cricket fan. To understand cricket, to understand what I mean by that. The only other Sri Lankan bowler at that time was Shaminder Vas, who was an exceptional bowler, and Harath. But Harath played a lot of his cricket for Sri Lanka post Morley. So as much as he did play games with Morley, most of his career came post Morley. So they only really had one other bowler, which was the Vas. So that means he was able to take a lot more wickets, but he didn't have the quality of bowlers that Shane Warne did when he was playing in his team. Because like I said, he had Glenn McGraw, Jason Gillespie, Brett Lee, Craig McDermott, Bruce Reid, Damien Fleming, Stuart McGill. There was also Tim May. You also had, occasionally the Ward brothers occasionally chipped in with the ball, and they occasionally took wickets as well, as much as they're not, you wouldn't call them bowlers, but they would occasionally pick up, a couple of 1 or 2 wickets here and there as well. So there was a lot of blokes in the side that there were games where Shane Warne didn't even get a bowl because the fast bowlers would just go through the team, or if he did get a bowl, he might get a few overs at the tail and pick up 1 or 2 wickets there. And he'd bowl 7 or 8 overs and he'd get 1 for 30, which would blow out his average because, it wouldn't blow it out, but, his average would go up because the fast bowlers have just simply taken all the wickets. That's why I think Morley would always bowl more overs because they just simply didn't have the bowlers. And that's why I believe Morley wasn't as good as Shane Warne. And if you look at their records, Warne didn't get wickets against India. Morley struggled Morley had a better record against India. Morley averaged around 32, whereas Warne averaged about 47 against India. And the reason why I bring up the Indians is because they're considered the best players of spin in the world. And Morley also, as much as Shane Warne obviously couldn't play against Australia, so it's hard to, say, oh, well, Shane Warne, you don't know what he would have averaged against Australia, but Morley averaged 36 against Australia, who were the best team in the world at the time, so when he played against the better teams, he did have the 2 best players against, best 2 teams against spin. His average was considerably high. He averaged over 30 when his overall records against is about 22. Morley also played 25 tests against Bangladesh and Zimbabwe, who at the time were by far the worst 2 test playing nations. And he took 176 wickets against these teams. Warne only played 3 times against Bangladesh and Zimbabwe and took 17 wickets. So you need to look at things as a whole. So that's why, Shane Warne took more wickets against better opponents. So That's why I believe he that's why I make the argument for Shane Warne being the better bowler than Morley, but I respect both opinions. One thing about Warne was everyone talks about his bowling, but his batting, as much as he would never win you a game with batting, but his batting, he wasn't a bad bat. He was a very good batsman, and his batting was often overshadowed by his bowling because his bowling was just off the charts. But his batting was also very good, and he was very unlucky never to get a Test century. He famously or infamously, depending on how you look at it, got dismissed for 99 at the Wacker when he hit a ball over Cal Corner and got caught out on the deep against New Zealand. He got dismissed for 99. But as a lot of people wouldn't know and would remember, he was Daniel Vittori, who was a New Zealand left-arm spinner. He bowled, who dismissed Shane Warne when he was a bowler when Warner was on 99, and he was that far over the line. Like, it was embarrassing. It was that far over. You would almost be like, he's surely taking the piss here. Like, this is, like, he was that far over. Like, you would be like, this is a joke. And how the umpires missed it, I do not know. He was that far over. He would be a good 4 or 5 centimeters over the line. So it wasn't even like it was like he's just gone over. He was a mile over. It should have been a no ball, and Warne should have got 100. But unfortunately, if it was now, they would have gone back and he would have had 100. But unfortunately, back in those times, they didn't go back and check the no ball like they do now. So unfortunately, he was dismissed on 99, and that's just one example. But there was several times where, he was batting with someone like Adam Gilchrist, where at times Australia was struggling. Like, they could have been 100 or 150 or 200 runs behind when it got to him batting at 8. And he would, bat with a recognised batsman, or even sometimes bat with the other players in the tail, like Brett Lee. Brett Lee, a lot of people would forget. Could bat as well, and that they would frustrate the opposition, and they would stay out there, and they could get it to a stage where Australia was even competitive in the game. And to a score, like, if you're 150 or 200 runs behind in the first innings of a Test, like, good, it's like, see you later, and you ain't winning the game, you're going to draw. But he would stay in and stay around with, someone like Adam Gilchrist or Ricky Ponting or whoever, and then after that, Brett Lee, and they would get Australia to either a lead or only within like 50 runs off the opposition, where if you bowl them out cheaply, like you could, which they often did in the second innings, they would had a chance to win the game, whereas, without his batting, the best result for Australia would have been a draw in the last innings, so he quite, as much as he much more was able to win a game with the ball, he could just as well save. He was never going to win a game with his batting, but he quite regularly would able to save games and get Australia into a position of winning a game with his batting. And he was also a great slip salesman. A lot of people forget, again, because his bowling was so good, people forget that he was a great slip salesman. He had a very good set of hands. He would as much as he infamously dropped a catch at Damien Fleming, which would have given him Damien Fleming his second hat-trick for Australia. But for every drop like that, he would have caught, 90 or 100 catches. Like, he would just very, very rarely would drop them. And but the thing was, with Shane Warne is, as much as people respected him on the field, people loved him off the field. He wasn't your typical cricketer. People quite often that play for Australia are very well spoken and that. And Shane Warne was well spoken, but he was a bit of a larrikin. He wasn't your typical cricketer. He was very different. He was he was a very entertaining player. He was, there were times where, for example, there was a time when he was playing for the Melbourne Stars in the BBL where he was bowling to Brendan McCullum, the New Zealand keeper batsman, who was playing for the Brisbane Heat. He said, Brendan McCullum was playing a certain way, so what I might do is put a slider in, and then sure enough he did a slider, and he said, I hope that he mishits it, and sure enough Brendan McCullum played all around it and clean bowled a middle stump, and he got a wicket going that. And so people like that analysis from him, and of course there were other on-field things that happened during his career that weren't pretty. There were obviously there was another game with the BBL where it was a Renegades Stars game. He was again playing for the Melbourne Stars, where the Melbourne Stars were batting first, and David Hussey, the brother of Michael, very good player in his own right, unlucky not to play a test for Australia, played a lot of one-day cricket for Australia. He hit a shot, and after bowling a Marlon Samuels, a West Indian, and he was about to come back for a second, and then Marlon Samuels pulled David Hussey back, so he couldn't run for the second run. And then when the Stars were bowling, Shane Warne was bowling to Marlon Samuels, and the whole thing got out of hand. There was massive blow-ups between Samuels and Warne. It was simply because Marlon Samuels, I think Shane Warne threw the ball at Samuels or threw it in his general direction, and Samuels threw his bat and things just got out of hand. So there was things like that, and he was also well known for other off-field situations. Infamously, he and Mark Waugh took money from a bookkeeper for information on the pitch, and there was also a drug scandal, which he tested positive for. He said that he didn't take the drugs, but he tested positive, and he unfortunately got a year ban for both. I believe he got a year ban for both these incidents. And there was obviously he was, there was a well documented that he was a little bit he liked going out with women and that, so which led to led to his breakdown of his marriage, which was well publicized. And there was also the breakup of his partner with Liz Hurley. But with most of these situations, with the exception of the drug, where he said I didn't knowingly take any drugs, performance enhancing drugs, he always put his hand up and said, "Yeah, I stuffed up. It's my fault. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses and BS people. I did it. I take responsibility. There's no point in trying to make excuses because it is what it is. I did the wrong thing, and I fully own up to it." And a lot of people respected that because so many people in the public eye, and this doesn't matter if it's cricketers or sportsmen in general, this is, a lot of people, from business people to people in media, they always point their finger at someone else or something, or something else, either someone or something else. And they always say it's someone else's fault, or it wasn't them, or this is, blackmail, this is a stitch up. So, we've all heard the excuses, and, but Shane Warne always said, put his hand up and said, yeah, if I stuffed up, yeah, that's on me, and I'm not going to make excuses. And I would have liked it. One thing I would have liked to know is if Cricket Australia had a media manager like they're doing now, where they give the players media training and like they're doing now. So because I reckon if they did, the media, whoever it would have been, would have had nightmares about Shane Warne. It was like, please nothing come out. Please nothing come out. Like, they would be going like, they would have had nightmares going, oh, please, nothing new, no other scandal come out, please. Because it was, because Shane Warne, he was a character. He always showed his personality. He was very extroverted, Shane Warne. He wasn't afraid to tell you exactly what he thought. He didn't mince his words, and he didn't care what people thought. Like, he was just basically like, if he found something that needed calling out, he would say, like, he would call it out. He wouldn't BS you. He would always tell you exactly what he thought. Or if it was something positive, he would say, that's positive. Good on you, mate. Like, good work. So, he would always give it both sides. And this led into his post-playing career as well. He wasn't afraid to tell you exactly what he thought on commentary. He went into commentary, and he always said, called it as he saw it. And sometimes it did, sometimes it did get annoying, and it did sometimes come across as he's got a vendetta against someone, or he did come across as up himself or arrogant. And it did, like I said, it does occasionally come across as annoying, but at least you knew where he stood. You wouldn't go, I wonder what he actually thinks. He would tell you on commentary, this is what I think of a certain player or something that's happened in the game. And he wouldn't hold back. And people respected that, and some people didn't like it, but a lot of people did. And in my opinion, a lot of the things that he said in commentary did make a lot of sense, and I quite often thought he was right in what he was saying. Obviously, occasionally I didn't agree with what he was saying. For example, the Mitchell Starc first ball of the Ashes, where it was the ball didn't swing, but for every one of those, there was a lot of times that he was 100% right. For example, and I think it was a Hobart test this year in the Ashes, where the Australians were standing very close together, and he didn't harp on it. Was more Mark Waugh harped on it, but he was the first one to bring it up, where he goes, the slips were basically standing in front of each other. They needed to spread out, like they had in the rest of the basically in every other test. And so his analysis was very good, because he saw things that a lot of other people didn't see, and he was able to explain it. And I believe he was a very good commentator, and I'm going to miss his commentary on Fox. I did quite enjoy it. And it's sad that he, just a few hours after Marsh died, it was extremely sad, and it's good to see that he's now getting, Shane Warne's getting that Great Southern Stand renamed in his honour at the MCG. Like, the Great Southern Stand is now going to be called the SK Warne stan. Some people just think it should be Shane Warne, but, it's going to get called the SK Warne in his honour, which I think is a great thing. He deserves it. If anyone deserves it, it's him. And, having Rod Marsh and Shane Warne die in a short period of time was extremely sad, but they're in a better place now, and we should remember, one thing I will say is, we should remember what was, we should remember their life and not, how they died. They, as much as it was a heart attack, it wasn't like they died in suspicious circumstance or anything, but we should remember how they lived, and as much as they're gone, then they will always be remembered, and there will be remembered as both players will be remembered as revolutionary players. Rod Marsh revolutionising the batting side of wicket-keeping. Shane Warne bringing back leg spin from bringing it back to life. And this is how people should remember them. Remember that they were exceptional cricketers, and, by all accounts, everyone said that they were exceptional blokes. So that's what people should remember, and we should be glad that, as much as I never got to see Rod Marsh play, but for those that did see either one or both of them play, we should be thankful that we did, because they were both exceptional players. They were both, great blokes, and just sad that they're gone, but I'll always remember seeing Shane Warne at the SCG. I believe it was his last ever game at the SCG. It was the Stars versus the Sixers. My team, the Sixers, got up, but I'll always remember that game where Shane Warne, he took a wicket that day, and I believe he got about 1 for 20. I think he got 1 for 28 that day, and I'll always remember it. And I got to see Shane Warne at the SCG and in his last game. And I was one of the 20-odd thousand in attendance that day. So, remember the good times, and always remember that. I'd like to hear what your memory. I know in the first few episodes I said I'd like to hear your thoughts on the episode, but this one's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to ask you to leave some memory. I want you to leave your memories of either one or both of these players. I want to hear your stories, and I think that's the best way to remember it. Remember them for what they were good at, and be positive in this time. So mourn positively, and I'd like to hear what your memories are of them, and please send them through. It'd be great to rate them. And thanks for listening.